All right, Sister Marie. You're the boss. Can I start?
Yes, dear.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 40th anniversary celebration of the core community at Providence House. I think you should all give yourselves a round of applause for making it up today. I am Danielle Manelli Pagnotta, and I've been the executive director at Providence House for just over 2 years. And I've had the opportunity to meet some of you, but I'm looking forward to getting to meet all of you, if not by the end of the day, over the next couple of years. I want to start, most importantly, by saying thank you. Thank you on behalf of all of the women and families and many children who came through our residences and programs over the years. You probably heard thank you a lot, but it's important for me to start with a thank you because none of you will admit it. This was a choice and in many ways a sacrifice that you all made doing this for so long. The impact that you made on those families was profound and continues to be as we carry the mission forward. So I just wanted to say thank you. I also want to mention that core community at Providence House, although it's jam-packed with many Sisters of St. Joseph, also includes sisters from many other congregations and some lay folks, many of whom are joined with us here today. And so it's a very broad group of people, women, and I want to recognize that. And then lastly, as I start, I think most of you know that Scott and I and Andrea from our office have been working with Sister Patsy and Sister Marie probably for the last 6 months to plan today. And if you thought those two women weren't committed to this community, I feel like I've planned another wedding. So I do want to ask both Sister Marie and Sister Patsy to stand because they're the reason I'm here today. So honestly, this celebration is about all of you, and I wasn't very comfortable giving the opening remarks, but Sister Patsy and Sister Marie encouraged me to kick it off as the executive director. So as I do, I would just say that upon reflection, I've realized that many moments in my life have been full of both loss and fulfillment. And being at Providence House has been one example. So I'll explain that to you. Not to get too deep and too personal, but as a young person, I had experienced a pretty significant loss of my brother. I was 10 and he was 22. And I turned to faith pretty early on in my life. At a time that even when my parents turned away from faith, and even encouraged me to turn away from faith, because they had pretty much given up. Turning to faith for me included contemplating joining a ministry and even religious life when I was in high school. I don't know if folks knew that. So it's not lost on me that I'm the first lay executive director of an organization that's been led by a group of sisters for 38 of the 40 years that it's been around. I think it's pretty ironic. I also reflected on, I went through a bunch of retreat programs when I was younger. One in my high school was called Emmaus. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that retreat program. And part of my respect and admiration for the core community is that you all walk the walk. And I actually asked Sister Marie in preparing for this morning if the sisters that and group of women that did core community were kind of the renegades among their congregations for signing up for this, and she kind of laughed at me. But in a way, I think that that's kind of what makes this group really special. A lot of, as I understand it, a lot of others chose to live in smaller houses without young kids and moms who were going through a lot of traumatic stuff living with them, and you all chose to live with those groups of people. So anyway, the story of Emmaus, for me, at its core, is just a great story because it's about a good walk and a good meal, and those are two things that I like. But there's a lot of parallels, I think, to the core community. So the first is really around compassion. So clearly we know that Jesus showed a lot of compassion on that walk with the disciples that day as they were kind of reeling from the loss of him. And it really struck me that he kind of listens to their sorrows and literally walks with them as they go from this really sad loss, disorienting moment to comfort and enthusiasm. And I think a lot about how you all have taken that same journey with women over the years who go from a place where they're distraught and lost to a place where they feel comfortable and are ready to kind of start to make positive choices in their lives. The second piece of Emmaus that strikes me is around hospitality. So Jesus had such a great impact on these two disciples as they're walking around that they invite him back to their house and they don't even know who he is. And it's pretty much what you all have done. I mean, you open your doors to perfect strangers for 40 years. And the beautiful thing for me is that by opening themselves up to a stranger is that they're transcended, their self-concern and their sadness ultimately prepares them for the great revelation that they'll learn at dinner that they're actually among Jesus, who they're sad that they lost. So again, that's just for me a really great parallel. And then the last piece of it is that over the course of dinner, they're so excited, clearly, that they're with him, that they want to go out and tell everyone about it. And there's this kind of duty to missionary that they feel after learning about this experience. And so the compassion and the hospitality and the duty to be a missionary are three things that really resonate with me about the story. It's kind of interesting because I think the core community plays both the role of Jesus and the disciples in different ways. But I've heard it over and over again from many of you that you've gained so much by living at Providence House, even though I can sit here and tell you all day how much you've done for the women. And even Sister Marie encouraged us to think coming into the room, how has being at Providence House changed you? And so, I know we're going to have a chance to hear a little bit more about that later, but I can tell you that in my 2 short years that I feel the same, that the impact on me has been greater than I'm sure the impact going outward. So your contributions and my choice to accept this role were very intentional, and that's really important. You guys made this choice. And I want you to know that as I'm standing here, I'm committed to keeping everything that you all started and grew alive, that sense of community, the compassion, the humility, the kindness, the love, all of those things. You have my commitment, and I take this really seriously, but I'm ready to carry it forward. So just kind of going back to that loss and fulfillment thing, I think some of you know that my mom got really sick shortly after I started at Providence House, and it was a protracted process, and she ended up passing away. And it was a really, really hard time. It still is a hard time for me. But what I can tell you is that being at Providence House and my kids, they give me this inner fulfillment and this ability to carry on. And for that, I will be forever grateful. So it's kind of amazing for me how there are these moments of loss and fulfillment that continue to happen over and over again in my life. And Providence House is now part of that. So again, I want to thank you all a million times over for what you've done and what you continue to do. I am humbled and honored to carry on, and I will carry it forward. And I just ask that you pray for me so that I can do even a small amount of what you've done over the last 40 years. So thank you. We thought it was important that we recognize those that are not here with us today. And I'm going to invite Sister Patsy up for a prayer.
Beautiful, right side up, here you go. We have a brief prayer of remembrance, and then it will go right into grace, so we can enjoy more food and more company. The disclaimer, since I've never been good at math, is there should be sheets on each table, but I miscounted, I think, in setting up the tables. So there might be 2 sheets with highlighted names. So when we get to the part of remembrance, when we pray for those women who are no longer with us, if we could just start over here with Mary Ann and whoever has the next names, just pick it up, okay? So having said that, I certainly say a good afternoon again, and a thank you to Danielle. That's a story a lot of us have never heard, and it's wonderful, wonderful. And Scott too, just were with us all the way, and Andrea, who's not here. So, here we are, celebrating 40 years of Providence Houses, and especially all the years of our sisterhood, of core community, whether it was a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 plus years in some cases. So as many of our gatherings and farewells have happened over the years, we've used and adapted the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. So I will ask Mary Walsh to proclaim that reading, that brief reading again.
Everything on earth has its own time and its season, finding and losing, keeping and giving, listening and speaking. God makes everything happen at the right time. Yet none of us can fully understand. We do not know that the best thing we can do is always enjoy life. Because God's gift to us is the happiness we get from our food and drink, and from the work we do. Everything God has done will last forever.
It is in this spirit that we gather on this beautiful day, and with all these beautiful people. And so we light a candle as we begin our time and our meal and all the catching up and all the stories. First, we lift up in prayer each other. Look around at all of the faces, all of the years, all of the living and loving, all of the oneness we experienced with each other at times, and with the women and children who are part of our houses. We pray also for those women who could not be here today because of travel, health, and other commitments. And finally, we lift up by name those women we lived with or who got to know who are deceased, but ever a part of our lives. And all the good they have done will live on in our hearts. And so we lift up
Barbara Baranowski, Mary Angeline Bertram,
Mary Bradley, Eugenia Calabrese,
Kathy Costello, Mary Dunleavy,
Mary Jane Fulton, Kathy Quatamere,
Kayla McClure, Beth Murray,
Patricia Ann Kelly, Carol Lynn,
Frances Teresa O'Reilly, Betty Pierce,
Jane Talbot, Patricia Ann Turner, Barbara Wittenko.
So let us close this remembrance with a blessing on each other and the food that has been prepared for us and those who cooked and are serving the food. As we pray together, bless us, O Lord, and these your gifts, which we are about to receive from your bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Patsy. So we thought, what better way to get this party started by enjoying lunch together. So lunch should be served within the next couple of minutes. Please enjoy. We're going to run a slideshow that we actually made for our party for Sister Elaine last year with lots of old pictures. So please enjoy those. And if you haven't seen, there's a couple of posters over there, one with all the names of folks who have served in core community, one with some old pictures, and then I think what's probably one of the first banners that we could find. So please enjoy, and we'll get back together in a little bit for our program. Thank you.
charge for. I have a single mother who lives in the Bronx, works in Midtown, has a son in pre-K, comes to Forest Hills on Monday night at 7 o'clock.
All right, I think we can begin. First of all, I just am so grateful to all of you for giving the time this afternoon to be part of us. It's just a wonderful experience, and thank you very, very much. A year ago, 10 of us were attending a celebration of the service years that Teresa Scanlon, she's done 34 years, Joan Gallagher, 30, had given to the women and children of Providence House 2. And as we were chatting together, Danielle posed this question. Do you have a story you'd like to tell about your experiences in Providence House's core community? Of course, never being lost for words. We went around the table and told different stories. So as it was done, we realized that we would like to capture these stories and more stories, your stories, and then create some kind of an oral history. Patsy at the same time was telling us that this in 2019 is we mark 40 years from the time that Elaine and those beginning sisters, Mary Ellen Kane, Elizabeth Mullane, and Mary Dunleavy, opened our home convents to women who were working out difficulties with the criminal justice system and for homeless families. Then Providence House grew. And we realized that our mission was really to create an environment in which people could begin their healing, and with the assistance of staff, kind of put them on the way to become more productive members of society. Providence House core community has changed, especially in the last years. But with the combination of staff who's being really educated in all our value systems, we are still providing for the women who come to us a protective and productive environment. Several months ago, and I think, Danielle, it was probably February or March, we started this process with the help of Danielle, who has been very, very supportive. She ordered this wonderful meal for us and is paying for it. She gave her energy and her insights, and we met periodically just so we could have this day as well as perfect as we possibly can. And Scott, who has really done a lot, he's our developmental officer, but he's involved in the audiovisual, which has been a headache. You'll find out why. And then Andrea, who is a lovely young woman who did all of the posters and sent all the save the date and invitation and kept things going. We owe a great debt of gratitude to her. We began this task to celebrate, well, actually we're celebrating ourselves. I realized that when I started, I said, that's what we're doing. We're celebrating who we are. We're trying to locate all those who had been in Providence House. I counted, this was the Herculean task really, was to find everybody who had spent at least 1 year as a core community. And in the pamphlet that you have in front of the program, there's 84 names, I believe. It's amazing. We reached out, and there were many people who don't live near or many are far, some who didn't respond, some who said they'd love to come, but they couldn't, some who had previous appointments. But one of the people that I'd like to raise up is a woman named Chris Benignis. She was our first full-time volunteer. She lived for 12 years with us in Providence House 2, Providence House 5, and Providence House 6. And she continues to interact with Providence House, and I believe that she is a donor. But she just represents some of the women who we shared this this story with. Also included in this celebration are our Sisters of St. Dominic. You want to stand up? The Sisters of Mercy. The Good Shepherd Sisters. The Sisters of Charity. And they're all Ursuline Sisters. We are very grateful to all of you who walk this walk with us. We also want to pay tribute to the leadership of Sister John Raymond, who gave her blessing to Elaine and company. We'd also, through the years, like to single out and say thank you to our presidents, Clara Centura, Angela Gannon, Gina Moore, and Helen Carney. Without your continued support, we would not be here today. Life in Providence House has had many joys and a few sorrows. Hundreds of women involved in the criminal justice system and the homeless families have crossed the doorways. And in our earlier years, those children and sisters who lived in my mother's house, which eventually became a separate entity, our children, under the guidance of Tisa Fitzgerald. Each of us has made a unique contribution to a woman or many women who came and with whom we lived. But as Elaine says, that our lives may be the only gospel these women read. The other part of it is, it wasn't all about them changing, it was about us changing. And as she said, the miracle of change is the miracle of us. As there are fewer of us in core community, we would like to capture some or all of some of the most poignant moments that we can proudly submit to our archives and to the contribution women have made in the area of social justice. We submitted questions to you. How did you get to Providence House? How did Providence House change you? What story, event, encounter would you like to memorialize? Some of you were dutiful and wrote the answers and sent them to the office. What? Some took part in a video, which took place in the 2 hottest days in July. And there will be time later in our program that will give you the opportunity to tell you your favorite story. None of these stories would have been possible had it not been for Elaine, who carried the vision of the founding sisters forward. I personally have a debt of gratitude to her for inviting me to live in Providence House 5 with women on parole. It has added a dimension and depth to my life as a sister of St. Joseph that would not have been otherwise. Thank you, Elaine. At this point in the program, I invite Mary Ellen Kane to give a tribute to Elaine on this, her birthday. Today's her birthday. Yeah. She's not well enough to come. We tried, Mary tried, but just couldn't happen. So thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
Often we look to Scripture for inspiration and guidance into how we should live our lives. We often find there some heroes who can challenge us and call us to the more. Two of my favorite women in the Hebrew Scriptures, their names are not well known. Indeed, I don't know of any churches or schools or hospitals named after them. And yet they had an important place in history. Their names are Shiphrah and Puah. Shiphrah and Puah were Hebrew midwives in Egypt prior to the Exodus. God-fearing women and mothers themselves, they defied Pharaoh's orders to kill all male babies born to Hebrew women, and they enabled the Jewish people to live and thrive. When Marie asked me to present a tribute to Elaine, the image of these midwives came to my mind. Midwives bring to birth. Shiphrah and Puah brought to birth in very difficult, dark, and dangerous times. When I think of Elaine's life, I am amazed that all she has midwifed or brought to birth. The prison nurseries, the Children's Center at Bedford Hills, Providence House, the thrift shops, my mother's house. And we cannot even count the number of women and children that she has delivered from evil and brought to new life. How many did she deliver into a new beginning where heart and mind and soul and spirit could really start anew? Many years ago, the Benedictine community of Western Priory stayed with us at Providence House 2 on Bainbridge Street. As part of their visit, I brought them to Bedford Hills. Elaine showed the brothers around, introducing them to the women and taking them to the nursery. As usual, when Elaine entered the room, the women lit up. Elaine had a word or a joke or a pet name or a tease or a remembrance for each of them, and there was much laughter. When we were leaving the prison, Elaine said to the brothers, "I don't want you to think that this is a happy place, because it is a very sad place." Elaine was never afraid to walk into the sadness of others' lives. In fact, it is where she spent most of her life. Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote, "There is nothing in the world, I venture to say, that would so effectively help one to survive the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is meaning in one's life." Elaine could survive and even laugh at the sorrow, pain, abuse, and sadness, and help others to do the same, because her life had meaning. And she helped so many other women find what they thought they had lost, hope and a reason to live. She delivered them, like a good midwife, from the despair and gave them a new vision for their future. Elaine wrote many poems, and in one of my favorites, she reflects on the need to see things in a new way, to have a new vision. She calls the poem Vision. Vision changes as we age. Some of us wear glasses to read. Others remove them to see better. Contact lenses appear to be the latest. On the altar still awaits another line, a sacred line, divine contact, holy vision for the risk taker, the daring pilgrim to truly see as if for the first time. Take heed, you practiced traveler. Beware, you common sense commuter. For dawning this awesome vision will lead you to a far different path. Gone will be, it can't be done. Fading fears will fly as faith invites us to sacred scenes seeing, new ways, new visions, and God. I wonder where I put those glasses. Elaine could lead others to this new vision because hers is a life truly centered in the love of God and neighbor without distinction. Elaine's great loves were the women of Bedford Hills, especially the mentally ill, and the women and children of Providence House. but she also related to the rich and powerful, celebrities, politicians, and movie stars, helping them to find meaning for their lives in the service of others. Elaine kept nothing for herself. She had few possessions. Everything she had was for the dear neighbor, and she expected the same from you. I have lost jeans, pantyhose, and shoes when I got up in the morning because someone needed them more. Elaine often carried a notebook around with her. In this book, she would often write quotes she had read or jot down a line that would be the beginning of a poem. She was keenly aware of the graces that surrounded her and would note them in her precious notebook. It was here also that she kept her stars. Elaine would give herself stars for doing things like going to Mass, saying the rosary, and she got extra stars for buying flowers to put in front of the statue of the Blessed Mother. Like all good midwives and all good mothers, Elaine knew when it was time to let go. A friend of mine had a stroke which affected one side of his body. After several months of therapy, I noticed that he was once again able to grasp things with his hand, and I commented to him on how great his improvement was. And he told me that holding on was the easier part. It was much harder to open the hand and to let go. Gradually, Elaine entrusted the women of Bedford and Providence House into other hands, realizing that the pain of letting go has meaning and purpose. All of the letting go might be the deeper invitation and open us to the possibilities of a new life. About 2 weeks ago, I went down to Stella Maris. Elaine did not know who I was. Later in the day, I went up to the second floor to say goodbye. As I approached Elaine's room, I saw her aide sitting outside the door and heard Elaine, who was resting on her bed, praying the Hail Mary over and over again. I wish that I had gold stars with me that day to put in her notebook. The dear midwife who has brought so many, including many of us in this room today, to new life, now needs our help to deliver her on the next part of her journey. Although she may no longer know our names or remember all the funny stories or the history that we shared, I hope that she may somehow feel the love and gratitude we have for her. And so, to end this, as a dear tribute to our Elaine, I would like to invite you now on this, her 88th birthday, to pray with me her favorite prayer. We pray it for her, that she too may be delivered to new life. And so let us pray for Elaine. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Mary Ellen. Sometimes it's hard for me to never have known what you all knew in her. And I love hearing every story that I've heard because she just sounds like such an amazing person. So thank you for continuing to share her spirit. I would like to invite Sister Helen Carney up to say a few words from leadership. And if you want to come on up now, we'd love to have you.
Thank you, Danielle, and congratulations to all of you and to all of the people who have shared in your lives at Providence House. I think it's only fitting to say welcome to our home, because that's what all of you have been about. Our congregation began in the kitchen, And anytime I've had the privilege to spend little bits of time at Providence House, that was truly the heart of the home, where the women gathered, where they cooked, even though I had to learn how to get used to some of the food. However, that sense of always being there and all of the tributes that have been made today in terms of the real prophecy that Elaine had in her heart, but you have in your hearts and continue to have. And so many things have grown from that original story of Providence House. All the services, all of the permanent housing, all of the, even Elaine continuing the journey with women on the journey. All of those women are still part and parcel of this community. And I think for us as a congregation, we are so proud to say that as a result of Vatican II, when we were called to go to our roots, you really went to the kitchen initially. But I think you went to where the greatest needs have been and continue to be. And all of you who have lived in Providence houses are still connected with them in some shape or form. And all of the people now that are doing the tasks that you used to do. But the core of the community is the heart of Providence House. And that heart is still beating strong. And we are so grateful to all of you and so proud for what has happened in the lives of women that many of us will never, ever even know. So thank you.
So now we'd love to continue on with some of the storytelling. And as Sister Marie shared, we did a couple things. One, we gathered some written materials from folks, and we also put a video together. I'm going to preface this by saying it was 2 of the hottest days, and the air conditioner is blasting in the videos, and so the sound was not perfect. However, we are going to be able to provide this to you electronically, so you can watch it as loud as you'd like by yourself, and also provide transcripts. And then we'll have another opportunity to do some more sharing in just a bit. So please enjoy. Thank you to everyone who participated. And thank you for bearing with us with the sound. There are some really good gems of stories locked in there. So now what we'd like to do, a little bit less organic than the first time around, is again open up the floor to all of you. We've got a couple of roving mics, and we don't have to be formal about it, but a good time to share a story, a remembrance, a difficult time, a good time, what brought you to Providence House, what kept you coming home, what you learned from Providence House, any of the above. So we're gonna walk around, and I'd actually, I don't know if you knew this, Sister Janet, but we would love for you to kick us off. But I'll give you a minute actually, because I have one other thing that I want to do before I ask you to start. So a few of you have asked what we did with the stories we collected, and the truth is we received only about 8. But today, as I said earlier, is the beginning of us formally documenting Providence House in the archives here. So I came out about a month ago, and Sister Pat was kind enough to show me every corner of the property, and I met with Virginia, and we talked about starting to transfer archives that we have in the office in Brooklyn out here to ensure that the history of Providence House and all that you have done is locked in the archive. So we've started a binder with the handout that was sent to all of you, and nice copies of the writings that did come in. And so you can absolutely still send those to us. You can email them to Andrea or talk to me afterwards if you need contact info. And we'd love to see this binder grow into a 2-inch or 3-inch binder over the years. And we're also going to take the transcript from today and include that. And of course, if anyone has other items they would like to contribute, please feel free. We've got a lot of good stuff.
And they can email me because.
And of course, Sister Marie will be the conduit as well, since she's in touch with all of you as well. Okay, Sister Janet, please, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off. Thank you.
Thanks for the heads up. I guess my life I mean, there's so many stories, like each one of us have so many stories. But Jeannie, when you mentioned Jeannie Ross about the children, I mean, certainly for me, the children were just so much part of my life at Providence House. And I would be remiss, Mary's shaking her head, if I didn't mention Dante.
I knew it.
You knew it, right? Dante and his mother, Valerie. And Valerie was what you would say borderline, which was what became her challenge. I think Dante and his mother probably were one of the longest residents, I think, that we had at Providence House. I'm gonna say about between 5 and 6 years with us, if you could imagine. And they started at Church Avenue. And so he was 2.5 when he arrived, and he left when he was 7 and moved from our house into our transitional apartments because we were trying to help the mother, begin to become independent. And subsequently, they did get into supportive housing after many years. But Dante, he was just an unbelievable little boy who, after his first year, he would be telling me and Sister Mary and the sisters what decorations had to go up. And he would say, isn't it time for St. Patrick's Day? I mean, isn't it time? And I'd be like, okay, Dante. And so I just remember when he left us, we had so many pictures of him that we actually made a photo album for him and his mother. And when you think about it, each of us, our families, they have photo albums of us, right? Of all of our lives. And so it was his photo life of his life starting at 2 up until age 7 when he left us for his own home. And I need to go visit them again. It's been a little while since I've seen them, but they still have a special place in their heart for Providence House.
I'm Sister Pat Handy. I'm a Dominican. And there's so many things I could say. But first and foremost, Elaine Ouellette was a crazy lady. So crazy, in love with God, so crazy about this mission. And you couldn't help be taken by her enthusiasm into this wonderful work of Providence House. And so I was lucky enough to be a part of one of the first teams that went in to help open Lincoln Road. And we had many a story. Tisa, Joan, Teresa, yes. And there was 2 others. And I just keep thinking you were there. Oh, you were there. Well, anyway, Peggy, the nursing sister, and Judy Golden, my friend, and Kathy the Mercer. So, well, anyway, as you can see, I don't remember too much. No. So here we were. I was invited by my dear friend Tisa. Wouldn't you want to, help us out, open this up? Sure. I get my friend Judy. Sure. Well, here we all had full-time jobs. We came home whenever you got home. And you were given a paintbrush, or you were given, let's move 25 mattresses from the basement. And let's throw the mattresses out the window, because we couldn't carry them down the 3 flights of stairs.
Good idea.
So, yeah. So we had many, many lifts. And then the first women arrived. And, but before that, we'd be like sweating, tired, exhausted. And here our beautiful Lane would come in like Loretta Young. Oh, we had such a lovely day. Don't we have a beautiful day? Oh, let's do this now. Let's all sit around and let's have, and we're like, always with a bouquet of flowers, always with a meaningful prayer, and always with a story. And we couldn't help but love her because of what she mirrored, which was the love of God. The second thing what Providence House did for me was when I moved into Providence House 6, which we called Coney Island. And there I met, for the first time in my religious life, I was living inter-community. And I loved it. We had Mercy Sister, Mary. We had the illustrious Joseph. We had Dominicans. It was a wonderful experience. We shared our charisms with one another. And it was for me a moment that Vatican II came alive, where we are all one. Religious, dedicated, committed, vowed women. We're all about the same mission. And living that way just was a manifestation of that. I'm ever so grateful, because it changed my life, And then the other was something Elaine taught me. On your birthday, you got the song of the year of your age. And I have continued that with my friends, with my family. And every year I put out their song of how old they are. And it's amazing how that song is so appropriate for them at that year of their life. It just is amazing, amazing. So another gift. Elaine keeps giving gifts over and over again. So I am ever grateful for the invitation. I'm ever grateful for once saying yes without the cost. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
It reminded me, I think it may have been Marion, your birthday. Elaine came and she said, we have tickets. And we said, tickets? For what? The merry-go-round in Coney Island. And we all went off on the merry-go-round and she had the guy keeping us going and going and going.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Ferdinand. I came from St. Lucia in the year 1988, and I was Benedictine nun, semi-Cloister. So I was sent here to, I guess, to make up my mind as to whether I want to continue as a Benedictine nun or be a lay person. And during my course, I spent time with my mom. And then God sent me to Abby. I met her at the church. And we began to talk, and I told her about my life. And one thing led to another. Then something happened at my mom with my stepdad, and he told me to get out. So I had nowhere else to go, and I was new in the place. I'm not American, and I still was working on my papers. So I spoke to Sister Avi, and she invited me over to Providence House. I went, I had dinner with them, and then one thing led to another, and I told them my problems, and then I was invited to live, and I lived with Joan, Teresa, Mary Ellen, and Eileen McCain, and I stayed there for a long time. But what really got me is the way they lived their life. They opened their house to strangers, people they did not know. And I'm saying, wow, I have been a stranger. I'm in the same boat as the people who were there. And when I got to know the kind of life they live as, not Benedictine nuns, they not only prayed, they had full-time jobs. And when they came from work, they opened their heart, they opened their life. I mean, they gave everything that they were to the people. And I was really, really amazed. And I said, wow, God is all powerful, and He's a very good God. But I want to thank Him in a special way because I've never thanked Him for taking me in, teaching me. One thing I remember Marilyn said, God is not a him. I have never forgotten that. And I said, really? It's true, God has no gender, come to think of it. But I was a little taken aback. when she said God is not her. But anyway, I accepted it and I moved on. And they have helped me throughout my life, my early life in America. I went to school thanks to Barbara Potenko and Diana from LIU. I got my degrees. I also worked at St. Joseph High School for 2 years. So I have been part of them and I'll continue to be part of them in my heart, in my mind, and please God forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And also Kathleen's mom, Virginia, was instrumental in the communities at Providence House, at Sachem Street, at Bainbridge Street, and then also in the Jamaica House. Yeah.
This is the story that I wrote in, and it's just so precious to me. You know how we talk about how we learned and we changed at Providence House. Well, one day, one of the women went out, she had just gotten her check, and I don't know whether she put the check in the back pocket or whatever, but she lost it. And she came back to the house and she was hysterical crying because that was all the money she had for the month and it was gone. And we were sitting around the kitchen table in Church Avenue, at Church Avenue. And we, you know, there was several, I don't remember who was there, who else was there among the sisters, but some of the women were there. And one of the women reached down, pulled a $5 bill out of her sock, and said to the woman, "This is all the money I have, but if it'll help you feel better, you can have it." And I always think about that story, and I think about that part in scripture where Jesus says, "You will do greater things than I." So it's one of the ways that Providence House touched me and helped me to grow.
Anyone else? No more stories? No more memories? We got to.
When we're talking about the core community, and Kathleen was part of our core community, and then she taught with me at St. Francis and continues there. And things that we did together were wonderful. But when you came to a point where you just really had it, or you just didn't think you could do another thing, we'd also always go back to Mariana's green peppers. Mariana was living with us when she was full-time at the hospital as the chaplain. And we would come home and we had to help finish up the supper at 4:30. And when we did that, you know, we were getting it ready and the women would be either out or coming in, so the doorbell's ringing, the phone is ringing, we're finishing up the supper. And Mariana had come this one day and she said, "I don't think I can do this anymore." We said, "Why?" She said, "The green peppers." I said, what do you mean the green peppers? They weren't cut up yet. I had the whole green pepper that I had to cut up for supper. We would all often, Avi, John and I would say, "I think I'm having a green pepper moment. I don't know if I can do this anymore." And at that point, then we did move into having longer staff members, and then even longer staff members. But it could be something like that, but it was a moment for us to sympathize with Mariana and understand where she was coming from. And I remember when I first went to be principal, I had the same feeling. I was going home after teachers were telling me they weren't returning the next year. And I was doing registration, and I was in Ave's car. I remember I'm driving in, and I said, "Oh my God." The meat mom. Anyway, I borrowed her car, and I'm saying, "Oh my God, I don't think I can do this. I can't do this anymore. I can't." And I think it was even before your green pepper movement. But in going home and then again finding the supportive community and finding children who would say, like I said on the video, "What kind of meat is this? What animal did this come from?" Because we would ask those same questions. If anybody remembers the cans that said pig on it, or had a picture.
Yes, we had a few of those moments too. But we could always laugh or help somebody discern the next step. Kathleen had left us, but she never left us in spirit. And Abe was always our guarantor of stability. So, and we lived with Dominicans, not only Marianne and Kathy Gadamer, Lorraine Leibel, Barbara Wittenko, lay people, Kristen Ignis, Jean Peter. Yeah, so we had a variety of people, and it was really growth producing for all of us. Thank you. I've lived in Lincoln Road for 29 or 30 years, and for, I guess, the first 25, they were women from prison, coming out on parole. And I think I've said too often, maybe, it's just like living with nuns. Because they were routine, They could step into something and you could say to them, well, we've done it this way, you want to give it a try? And they'd say, oh yeah, okay. But in those 25 years with parolees, I lived with 2 criminals. Only 2. And both of them had committed murder quite deliberately and planned and separated. Both of them killed 2 people a few days apart, and it was meant to happen. It was not an off-handed thing that happened in the moment of maybe being abused, as most of our women were. So they were easy to live with. And life in Lincoln Road was much easier than it was in all the other houses, because you didn't have to have the heartache of watching failed parenting. And I think that was probably one of the biggest burdens for the sisters who lived with families. As delightful as it was to have the kids with you, you knew that in so many cases, the mom really wasn't adequate to the task for the sake of the kids. And that was a heartache. I've known personally, I think my whole life, that I have lived a charmed life. But I never knew it as clearly as when I moved into Providence House. And I remember, and I've said this before to many people, I remember sitting in our kitchen at 5 o'clock one morning with a cup of coffee, with a woman telling me that her mother had died while she was in prison. And I said, oh, that had to be so hard for you. Did they bring you home? She said, no, but I didn't really need to come. My memory of my mother is telling me to F off all the time. Don't you see I'm on the phone? Don't you see I'm cooking? Don't you see And I thought to myself, this is probably true of so many of our women, and you don't hear these stories. And I honestly thought that my mother sat and waited for me to come home every day that I went to school. And finally, when I was about 10, my father said to me, who do you think cleans the house and does the wash and cooks the meals? I thought, oh, that was Dawn. We never know where these people come from, what these women have suffered. And I know that if I lived in their skin, I would be a drug addict. It is just so hard being some of them. And we've had the privilege of accompanying them and just having our life prioritized every day. Because I have many green pepper moments every day. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm the green pepper lady. When I think of the hundreds of women that have passed through our doors and the children, and most of the time we never know what happened to them. But I've had the joy of knowing 2 that we all remember. One was Jessica. She was young. She had been living on the subway. And the women who ride the subways, they can pick each other out. She was pregnant, and the other woman said, "You have a place to go?" She says, "No." She was afraid to go to the city shelter. She says, "Well, I know a place that the nuns run. It's very clean. You'll like it there." So I worked all day at the hospital, and I was on duty that evening, and Jessica just came to the front door and pregnant, and all the other women really took to her. They were kind of watching out for her. So the day came when she was ready to give birth. This is coming apart. And I was on duty that day, so I couldn't stay with her in the delivery room while she was waiting. And the nurse says, "Don't worry, we'll call you when she's ready." So about 12 midnight, I get a phone call. So she swears that I came in my pajamas. I really didn't. But she swears that she has a whole story. My raincoat over the pajamas. And at night, bedside, he didn't stop for the red lights. He just went right through. And I arrived at the hospital, gowned up, went into the delivery room. She took my hand. She said, "I waited for you before I pushed." 3 pushes the baby was at. This was her first child. And the resident said, "God has given you this beautiful baby boy. Now you take good care of him." That baby boy now has his own baby. Abimael now has little Rose, and Ave and I went to the christening. And the other daughter, she's now married, and it turns out she's HIV positive. And again, the sisters helped her through that whole scene. And her daughter, Geraldine Fitzgerald, on the vice presidential debate. Geraldine Ferrara, not sure. And I get a phone call. It's a psychiatrist from Elmhurst General. And say, "Sister, you're the next of kin to Mary?" So I said, "Well, not really, but I'm the only one that she would, know here in this country." So at one point, Mary was very well taken care of. Again, when you think of us as advocates, because I am who I am, she was so well taken care of at Elmhurst General, and she was ready for discharge. So when I went to the discharge planning, they wanted her to come back with us. So I said, no, the best thing would be for her to go back to Nigeria, where she has family. So I would be getting these phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, and Teresa would say, 3 o'clock in the morning, it must be Mariana. So as it was, her brother was able to come over for her. But the daughter who was born in this country, I always say the birth certificate, she's back in this country. She has 2 children. She's a nurse living up in Boston. And she sent the 2 children back to Nigeria while she was finishing up her master's degree. And the way she's paying for her master's degree is by that program that I had heard about, where you go to places where nobody else wants to go to, and the government then pays for your education. So the last I heard from her, she was out west of Albuquerque working with the Native Americans. So they're 2 wonderful stories of our women, and who would never have been where they are without us. It's just so humbling. So even though we all have our green pepper days, it's probably my experience at Providence House was my best ever experience of community. It all came together: the prayer, the mission, and community.
So on the other side of the Green Pepper Days is that we all sort of shared in common was Christmas at Providence House, which is like no other Christmas ever. There's the collection of the gifts, the delivery, the clandestine sorting of gifts according to families. I mean, in my experience of doing this, there was so much thought that went into the collection of gifts that each woman would get, each family would get. And to have that, I'm really struck by in the video when Mary was saying sort of like, taking on the eyes of poverty, or like, you start to like see through different eyes. And Christmas always sort of like, highlighted that. I'll never forget one family. They were it was that family where there was like 5 kids and newborn twins, and and the mother had, and a mother with a lot of issues. And on Christmas Day, when she opened her own gifts, and said, and looked at them and saw them, I'll never forget that she's like, you know me. I mean, it was almost like, this is like we were witnessing something for the first time. And I'll never forget that moment in particular, but just, Christmas in general, just being like such an extraordinarily happy time in the house.
Thank you.